Hello everyone, welcome back to the Splatoon 2 commentary of Octo expansion specifically. We did the original Splatoon 2 as a commentary earlier though. If you want to watch that, go do so. The game's much different now.
You know what?
Yeah.
I don't even remember that commentary. Was I part
That's
of it?
because you weren't there.
Okay, that's good. I was gonna say if I don't remember it, if was I there? If I was there and I don't remember it, must have been really forgettable. I was only
Lewis
part of,
falls down in the forest and he doesn't remember that he did.
It must
What
have been a really
Legacy
fucking
of
boring
Kane
forest.
game is he going to reference next?
Well, if it's a forest, it can only be Blood Omen, because that's the only game with forests worth a damn.
Yeah, so yeah, the game is much different than it was back then. Just a couple of the changes. First off, obviously they added a butt ton of new maps and weapons to the single player. They added this, obviously. Salmon Run, which is the best new mode in the game, without even close, got a couple of new maps, but that's kind of it. I'm hoping that if they bring it back for Splatoon 3, they get rid of the stupid time limit thing that they had on it, which was awful and bad, and they should feel bad about having it. So the way that Splatoon does multiplayer, if you aren't familiar, is that every couple of hours they change what maps and modes are available. Turf War is always available, that's kind of the default mode, but sometimes it's only clams, sometimes it's only splat zones, sometimes it's only tower control, and so on and so forth. I don't mind it as much for that, because even though, I didn't want to do clams on this map, I wanted to do clams on this other map. It's not really that big of a deal, and it does mean that you do play all the maps instead of just, the three that the competitive community says are the correct ones.
To me, it's a matter of all the modes should be available, but the map rotation's fine.
I would agree with that general statement as well. I think that you should choose there should be a Splat Zones lobby and a Clams lobby and a Rainmaker lobby and etc. What is dumb is that Salmon Run, which is effectively this game's kind of horde mode, they just kind of only have it open sometimes. There were periods of 2 days where it's you just can't play Salmon Run for some reason. And that was a dumb idea, and it was bad. So in Splatoon 3, again, I think most people are fine with the maps changing every couple of hours, but please just let us play Salmon Run whenever we want. Because it's the most fun mode in the game, in my opinion. Because it has the sort of survive till the end mentality that that horde modes have, but you can win is the other thing as well, which is part of what makes horde modes tiring in kind of other games, is that and a lot of the time you just keep on going until you lose, but once you get good enough at the mode, you can't lose. So you're just doing it over and over again, and that's not super fun. In Salmon Run, you go until you either win or you run out of time and you lose. So it gives it its own kind of different feel. That's really fun, and I really hope that they get rid of that time limit in 3. Although we know very little about 3 at this point, I should also say.
Yeah, I feel like they announced it a little bit too early.
I kind of agree. I think that I think they didn't want it to overshadow stuff they had for E3. Is
probably, but it's one of those. I feel like they could have done WarioWare in February and then Splatoon 3 at E3.
I think that might have worked as well. Maybe because Nintendo's E3 this year was very good. I should stress. I was hoping for some Splatoon 3 info. We didn't get any, which was slightly disappointing. But we got there's a new Advance Wars coming out and a new WarioWare and stuff like that. I feel
new Advance Wars kind of blew my fucking mind, actually.
I never expected that they would bring that series back from the dead, because you can't put waifus in it.
It's.
I mean, I guess you could, but then literally, why not just play Fire Emblem?
Isn't there an anime based on that concept?
Probably.
Like, I guess that's kind of Valkyria Chronicles is sort of
No, that's
Advanced
not
Wars
what I
with
mean.
waifus.
Although you're not wrong either.
Oh man, I really wanted to like Valkyria Chronicles. I have only played a little bit of the first one.
Yeah, same. It's a little too. The first one was too captured the flaggy
My big
for
problem
my
with it was
liking.
that I didn't like how the characters worked because the characters were all kind of generic. Like it's
Oh, well, I guess I'm just used to that in tactical games because, like, I grew up on Shining Force and then Final Fantasy Tactics, and neither of those games had a particularly interesting extended cast.
yeah.
So,
Well, not even just in terms of like the characters themselves. Like Disgaea, just as an example. I'm not the biggest fan of that game either, but even among the generic units you could create, they all kind of had different functions. In at least Valkyria Chronicles 1, each character felt mostly the same among their class, and
oh yeah.
there were only like 4 classes.
Well, the thing is there's a random element in who you're getting in the barracks first,
There is?
and you get more as you go along. Yeah, you don't start with the same people every time, besides like the plot critical ones.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
So the idea is that they're all their stats are slightly different enough to where you kind of have to alter your playthroughs, but obviously the all classes all have to be similar enough to where that doesn't matter too much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
generally speaking, in strategy games, I prefer when the units are different enough that choosing the unit itself is part of my strategy versus, okay, this paladin has +1 attack and this paladin has +1 defense. That's not the kind of strategic choice making that I think is super interesting. That's part of why I like Codenames Team so much and why I show that game all the time. Is
On the
because
other
all the
hand, if
characters
you-
are so different.
On the other hand, if you do it that way, you're going to wind up with characters who are clearly better than others.
Yeah,
for
that's what
certain
I was
maps.
gonna
And
say,
If you want
like-
to play, if you want to play for story and characterization, you can wind up being stuck not using
Yeah,
who you
like-
want or giving yourself a hard time because the character you like happens to not be good.
Yeah, it's,
Yeah.
it's kind of like that was kind of what I was gonna say. Like in Fire Emblem, and even in Shining Force, there's always the character who's clearly the better mounted unit. There's always the character that's the better archer. There's the better monk. Like, why the hell would I ever bother with Sheena when I can just make Sarah my monk, and she's better at everything than Sheena is? It's just
Yeah,
kinda
that is definitely true. Like, in Awakening, like I never really use oh god. What's the name of the monk with the long hair? In Awakening. The one that everybody thinks is a girl but is actually a boy.
I don't remember.
I don't remember.
Exactly.
But like in Fire Emblem, that's especially a problem because the characters have their support scenes attached to them, but you have to use the characters to get those. So
Yeah.
you're missing out on content. Or conversely, because you want to see all the content, you're using a clearly inferior character and making life harder on yourself.
Yeah.
So
I just personally would prefer having the that kind of strategy at the risk of having some characters that I don't ever really use. Like that's kind of the trade-off.
I mean, it's personal. It's
Yeah.
personal.
At that
preference
at a point,
so.
Ryan's right. It just becomes what do you prefer, and I just prefer.
I
it
guess that's part of
the
the
other way.
reason that I like Final Fantasy Tactics so much is because, like, the job system is there, and what makes like specific plot critical characters unique is that they have a unique job of their own to go with the job system, rather than them necessarily just being the better option for one specific character class. You know, so
Was the Octopath team Final Fantasy Tactics type game the demo? Did either of you play
Triangle
that?
strategy. Not yet. I need to. I never got around to it.
Okay, because I haven't gone to it either, but I have kind of hope for that game because God, I'm gonna mix up Octopath and Octo Expansion at some point, aren't I?
They
God.
came out the same year too, so
Man, the Octo Trilogy is just Octo Dad, Octo Expansion, and Octopath. Like I don't know what they were thinking with that naming scheme. In any case, Octopath was kind of, as an RPG, was kind of an A for effort, C for execution instance for me, in that it had a lot of really cool ideas. The aesthetics were gorgeous. The actual game was fine. That's my short review of it. But if they're doing a tactics game, they can just kind of focus on the stuff that they did well, which is combat. The combat in Octopath is great. The environments were great as well, music. And there's less focus on stuff like dungeons, which were absolutely awful in Octopath, and story, which was not great in Octopath, but certainly showed promise. The problem was that they chose a weird structure for their game, which made telling an interesting story very difficult.
Well, it's sort of. You get 8 mini stories, and the other characters just happen to be around rather than one overarching story. Because I think all the character stories are good. There's just no real reason they're traveling together.
That's kind of a Saga sort of approach to storytelling when I think about it.
It's very similar to the Saga games, yes. But you just get some kind of stuff like Therion being like, I work alone. I don't trust anyone. I have no friends. And then he just meets Tressa, who's like the happy-go-lucky bard. And he's like, yeah, sure, I'll help. Whatever. Sure. I have friends now.
I'm an honest merchant who just wants to make a name for myself. I'll help you steal something.
That just makes him sound.
That's kind of the reason why I'm not the biggest fan of job systems in traditional RPGs, because you wind up with this series setups where meet Lord Jonathan the Knight, heir to the noble household. His swordsmanship knows no bounds, and suddenly he feels like being a white mage. Like, what?
I mean, that is part of the charm in certain instances. Like, I'm thinking of Bravely Default and those stupid-ass outfits they have for everybody. Like, that's clearly supposed to be part of the charm. But, yeah, it is. You do also get stuff like, I'm Sneaky McSneakerson, the best thief in the multiverse. And then he's the guy who, you make him a berserker who's supposed to stand in front and take enemy hits. And it's like, what?
That's kind of why Final Fantasy just says fuck it and makes the job system itself some kind of superpower. Like, it's granted by the crystals, and it's not like something that overlays on top of a character with a particularly defined character class at all.
It's kind of why I like the Octopath way of doing it, where you always keep your base class and you just add one on top of it, and you can kind of have to switch around the secondary one depending on what you want to do.
So that was interesting, but in terms of gameplay, I thought that it made it a lot easier to break the game.
Because some characters are just more suited to secondary jobs than others. Like, you're never going to make Ulbron a mage. You're going to make him another hunter.
Yeah.
Because that lets him use more physical weapons.
But it also, I think, just made it a lot easier to find those broken combinations. Like, you can break the game in half in Bravely Default 2, but you have to go hunting a little bit more for it, versus in Octopath Traveler, it was very easy to find the combination of Tressa and her dodge ability and whatever the name of the class was
Rune
that
Lord.
let you pass all of your buffs onto everybody.
That's Rune Lord, but you did have to be kind of a boss to get Rune Lord, though.
Yeah. I mean, Octopath also has an issue with its difficulty curve is all over the place.
I'm not saying Octopath is perfect, but I like that job system better than the traditional job system.
Yeah.
And I'd like to see it be used in a better RPG.
Yeah, it's just disappointing. But I mean, the team does look like they're doing some cool things, because Octopath, Triangle Strategy looks interesting, and they're just remaking Dragon Quest III, so that they already literally have the bones of a good game right there, and they just need to make it.
But they're not doing it for Final Fantasy VI for some stupid reason.
I mean, they should do it. I mean, I think Chrono Trigger would probably be a better choice.
Well, 6 and Chrono Trigger are the two obvious ones, yeah.
Yeah, but no, doing Dragon Quest III, like, considering how fundamentally, like, absurdly popular that game is in Japan, especially, like, it absolutely makes sense for them to do it, especially since it's supposed to be a 35th anniversary kind of thing.
Also, they kind of screwed the pooch with their Dragon Quest 1 to 3 ports to Switch.
Yeah, there's no reason to ever buy that 3 port ever again on Switch once the HD version comes out, because you can either have Dragon Quest 3 or Dragon Quest 3 at home, and Dragon Quest 3 at home has no animated sprites. So what are you going to pick?